Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos Lamed Hey, Kesubos 35. Today's Daf Yomi, we're going to start on Lamed Daled Amabez around 12 lines from the bottom on 34b. Gemara has discussed several different approaches to our Mishnah, which contradicts the Mishnah in Makos. The Mishnah in Kesubos says that where a woman is assaulted, if a person assaults a sister, that he pays a fine, whereas the Mishnah Mako says he gets lashes. So Rabbi Yochanan explained that the difference was that in Makos he was warned for lashes, whereas in Kesubos he was not warned for lashes. Mr. Rish Lakish says, no, in the Mishnah in Kesubos is according to the position of Rabbi Meir, and where he gets mammon and lashes, where he gets the money in addition to the lashes. Ula said the distinction is that the Mishnah Malkos is a Bilgeres, therefore she gets lashes, whereas the Mishnah in Kesubos is a Nahara, therefore she has a payment. So the Gemara says, Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan Lama Rish Lakish. It makes sense that Rabbi Yochanan does not want to follow Rish Lakish's approach to Kamukim Rabbanan, because Rish Lakish has said that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yochanan wants to say our Mishnah is like the Rabbanan. So therefore, he doesn't want to say you make a payment and you get lashes. So he doesn't want to follow Rabbi Meir's approach because that's a minority opinion. Now, Rish Lakish, my time Rabbi Yochanan, why does Rish Lakish not want to follow Rabbi Yochanan's approach? Amracha, so Rabbi Yochanan would say, Kivan dilu asrubay pater. So the reason why Rish Lakish doesn't want to say like Rabbi Yochanan is because he'll say to you, because since if you had warned him, he would be exempt and not have to get lashes. Kilo asrubay nami pater. That Rabbi Yochanan had said that where you warned him, he gets lashes, and where you don't warn him, you make the payment. Rish Lakish doesn't want to accept that. Rish Lakish says it's not on the punishment, it's on the action. So since if you had warned him, he'd get lashes, and also even if you didn't warn him, he would still have kiloas, he would still be exempt from the monetary penalty. That's what Rish Lakish says. Since if you warned him, he'd be exempt from the monetary penalty, so too when you didn't warn him, he's also exempt. And Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan in this respect follow their opinions. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you don't warn him, you get the monetary penalty. We don't apply kimlei b'derabminei, and so you don't get lashes. You get the monetary penalty. Rish Lakish says whether or not you warned him, since the action causes kimlei b'derabminei, the result is you don't give him the lesser punishment. There's no monetary penalty. If you do something where if it's accidental, if you had done it intentionally, you'd be liable for death or lashes. Rabbi Yochanan says, in this case, you would be, hey Jeff, Rabbi Yochanan says you would be liable, because since you're not getting the punishment of death or lashes, we're not going to apply kimlei b'derabminei. Whereas Rish Lakish says pater. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev Dahalo Asrubei. Rabbi Yochanan says you're liable because since you were warned, so you're not getting the more severe penalty. So we give you the lesser penalty. Whereas Rish Lakish says pater. Even the Asrubei pater, since if you would have been warned, you would have been exempt. Because of kimlei b'derabminei, kilo asrubei nami pater. When you weren't warned, you're also exempt. Again, Rish Lakish says kimlei b'derabminei is not on the punishment, but it's on the action that would have caused the punishment. So Eitzvei Rish Lakish or Rabbi Yochanan. So Rish Lakish challenges Rabbi Yochanan again, that Rish Lakish is of the opinion that even if you did the action accidentally, you don't get the punishment, we still will apply the principle of kimlei b'derabminei, and you won't get the lesser penalty. So Rish Lakish challenges Rabbi Yochanan because it says that if in the Torah, if a man strikes, he's intending to strike another man, he ends up striking a woman and she does not die, then he will get If she does not die, then he will get the punishment, which implies my love, ason mamash. Doesn't this imply that if she doesn't die, then you do the monetary penalty? But if she does die, even without warning, even where there was no asra, then you don't have a monetary penalty. Exactly like Rish Lakish says, and not like Rabbi Yochanan. Gemara says no, din ason. It means no. If there is no situation, meaning to say if she doesn't die, meaning to say if the woman does not die, then we're going to say that he has the monetary penalty. But if the woman dies, then we would not apply the monetary penalty, even if she dies accidentally. Alternatively, some learn this whole back and forth, not as Rish Lakish asking Rabbi Yochanan, but as Rabbi Yochanan asking Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan or Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan challenges Rish Lakish from the answer. Basically, it's the reverse. So he says, if she will not die, then he will be punished. My love dinner. So it doesn't mean if she doesn't die at all, and only then will you do the principle of, meaning to say if my love dinner son, meaning to say that when does she get the punishment? Only in a circumstance where there's no death at all, but if there's death, but it was accidental, she would still have to pay. Gemara says, no. Asomamash. No, only when does he pay? Only when there's no actual death. Okay, so now we're on the top of 35a. So we've established that Gemara thinks that now that according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you're liable for death, but it was accidental, then we're going to apply the principle of Kimle B'Daramine, since we're not able to give you the actual punishment for the death. We'll give you, yes.
I can be liable for death for something you've done unwittingly.
So that's the point, meaning to say as follows. If you've done an action, and if you would have done it intentionally, you'd be liable for death. Now that you've done it accidentally, Rabbi Yochanan says, you're still liable. We don't apply the principle of Kimle B'Daramine, where Shalkish says, we apply the principle of Kimle B'Daramine because we don't go by the punishment, we go by the action that precipitated, that would have caused the punishment. So the Gemara says, Amaravo, mi iko aman damachive misis shogugen chayavim. Rava says, is there really such an opinion, i.e. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that if you're liable for death accidentally, that if you have an accidental liability for death, then we're going to say we don't apply Kimle B'Daramine and you're liable for the lesser penalty, i.e. the monetary penalty. But it was taught from the Academy of Chizkiah, Maka Adam Maka Behema. The one verse says, if you strike an animal or if you strike a person, Ma Maka Behema, just like when you strike an animal and you have damages, tort damages, Lo Chilakhtabo Be Mishogi Ben Bemazin, just like when you strike an animal, we don't care if it was accidental or intentional. We don't care the manner in which you did it. You have liability. So too, when it comes to striking a person, when it comes to striking a person, to killing a person, but you always have to pay, meaning to say, that we say that if you strike the man and you kill him, everybody says you're exempt from having to pay. Just like by an animal, everybody says you're liable under all circumstances. So too by a person, if you kill him, then everybody's going to say there's no monetary penalty, even if you killed him accidentally. So therefore, everybody says, according to Tana D'Vei Chizkiah, that everyone says you're exempt from having to pay money if you kill this person accidentally. So if that's the case, how can we say Rabbi Yochanan says if you kill him accidentally, you're liable to pay money? So therefore, Rabin says, you're right. That's not what Rabbi Yochanan says. If you kill somebody accidentally, everybody says you're actually exempt from a payment of money. even Rabbi Yochanan. Kipwigi, when is there an argument? B'chayve malkos shogin. There's only an argument when you do an action which, if you didn't intentionally, would result in lashes. Now you've done it accidentally. Let's say you've done something accidentally which would result in lashes. So vidavar achar, and you also did at the same time a monetary penalty. Rabbi Yochanan Amar chayev chayav. Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayev. Rabbi Yochanan says then you would have to pay the monetary penalty there. Why? Chayev misos ishkush, chayev malkos lo ishkush. When we compare it to an animal where we say you're always going to be liable, that's death is compared to an animal to say you're always exempt from the monetary payment. But if you're liable for lashes, if there would have been liability for lashes, we don't compare it. And we therefore draw a distinction. If you're liable for lashes, you're exempt from the monetary penalty. But if you're not liable for lashes, you're not exempt. Whereas Rish Lakish says, Rish Lakish says, no. If you did an action which, if you had done it intentionally, would have resulted in lashes, now that you've done it accidentally, you're still going to be exempt from the monetary penalty. Why? Because the Torah specifically compares one who is liability for lashes to one who is liability for death. That if you do it accidentally, just like by death you're exempt, so too by lashes you're exempt. So the Gemara asks the question, Heichan ribta Torah, where indeed does the Torah make this explicit comparison between death and lashes? Where indeed does the Torah make this comparison? Heichan ribta Torah. So Abaye says, Asya Rasha. It says by liability for death, it calls you a wicked person. Not sure who Rasha is. And it says by liability for lashes, Vaya'im bin hakosa Rasha. So just like so we see that lashes are compared to death, and death is compared to the animal, and so therefore, just like you're always exempt from the monetary penalty by death, so too by lashes. That's what Abaye says. Whereas Rava says, no, Asya Maka. We compare lashes directly to the animal, just like by the animal, there's no distinction, you're always liable. So too by the lashes, there's no distinction, and you're always exempt. So Rav Papa immediately challenges Rava. He doesn't like that comparison. Rav Papa, Amarle Rav Papa Rava, hi Maka, which Maka? It says Maka by lashes compared to an animal. Which Maka of the lashes? And if you strike an animal, you pay, or if you strike a human being, you always die. That's not referring to lashes, that's referring to a man who killed another person. So it must be this verse. That if you strike an animal, you always have to pay. Nefesh tachas nefesh, soul for a soul. And right next to that, it states in the verse, right next to that, it states in the verse, a person who strikes another person, which means to say lashes. That if you strike somebody, you get lashes just like you did to him. But the Gemara says, but Rav Papa questions Rava, I love makahi. There it doesn't say the word maka like it says by an animal. There it says kitein mum. So how can you compare the two? It's not the same word. So the Gemara says, no, Rava would say, Hanan, haka kamrina. We just say that they're both talking about the same concept, the same topic about lashes. It doesn't mean that's to use the same word. Mara says, but still, this verse, which Rava is citing, the ishkitain mum ba'miso, that refers to one who strikes their friend. But somebody who strikes their friend, they're not getting lashes. They have a monetary penalty. How can we learn from here that one who strikes their friend accidentally, therefore they don't have to pay lashes, you're exempt from money? And this is a case, chovo b'chavero is a case where there's not lashes, there's a monetary penalty. So the Gemara says, well, okay, yeah, but it's not always the case that a chovah b'chavero is a monetary penalty. If you're not going to apply it to a case of where you strike him where there's a monetary penalty because it was a wound that causes a penny's worth of damage, because we have another verse to teach us that, because it says Ken yinasam bo davar nisa miyad yad, as we learned earlier on Lama Gimel Amud Beis. So therefore, if it's obviously not teaching us the one who strikes his friend as a monetary penalty, it has to teach us this law. It should teach us this law about a case where you strike him in a case where there's not a monetary worth of damage, and so therefore it is a case of lashes. And we're saying that if there's lashes, if it would have been intentional, there would have been lashes. Now that it's done accidentally, there's no monetary penalty. But the Gemara says, but well, if that's the case, there's nothing to pay here. It's less than a pruta. And so what are you exempting him from? And we're on top of 35b. There's literally no payment here anyway. So how can you learn from here the idea that you're exempt from payment? This is a case where there's never payment. It's less than a shava pruta. So, but maybe, as Rashi said, maybe if there would have been a shava pruta, maybe you draw the distinction and you would have to pay. So the Gemara says, no, tzricha, tebahade, demilchya, kara, shirayan, delay. No, it is possible, even though the wound was less than a shava pruta, at the same time that you were striking him and wounding him, you tore his shirt, and his shirt was worth more than a penny, and that is a monetary penalty. So we're being told that you're not liable for the lashes, but you are, since you're not liable for in a case where you did accidentally, so you're not liable for the lashes, you're also going to be exempt from the monetary penalty according to Reish Lakish, because of Kim Levi D'Rabmine. So Amarle Rav Chia Rav Latana de Bechizkiah. So Rav Chia turns to Rav and he says, according to the Tana de Bechizkiah, who says Maka Adam Maka Behema. He says, what's the source that if you did a Chive Misas Shogegin, that if it was an unwitting murder, unwitting killing, that everybody says you're going to be exempt from the monetary penalty because of Kim Levi D'Rabmine? And the source for this is Maka Adam Maka Behema. The source is that just like if you strike an animal, you always have liability. So too, if you strike a human, you never have liability. Kill a human, you never have liability. But how do we know that if you strike the animal, you always have a monetary liability? It's possible that you could have no monetary liability, or if you strike the animal in a way where you have liability for death if you did it intentionally. So maybe it's maybe not a good proof. As the Gemara says, how do we know it took place during the week? And so therefore there's no distinction between shogeg and mezid in that case, because it was done during the week and we always have the monetary penalty. Dilma b'Shabbos, maybe the verse is referring to Shabbos, and so therefore the verse is telling us about somebody who kills accidentally. Vidilma v'alkarchach b'shogeg. So Dilma b'Shabbos ksiv, as Rashi says, v'alkarchach b'shogeg ksiv. Quran, the verse is referring to accidentally. That if it will be done intentionally, you'll be liable for death and you'll be exempt from the payment. And so therefore, as the Gemara says, Dilma b'Shabbos, maybe it took place on Shabbos. Dilma b'Shabbos ksiv behema gufa iko lefuge. And then under those circumstances, by an animal itself, we would indeed be drawing a distinction between accidental and purposeful. And so therefore, by a human, we lose the comparison to say that where you kill unwittingly, you're always exempt from a monetary penalty. Where it says, don't say that. You must. If you strike the animal, you always have to pay. And if you strike the human, you're always put to death. What is the scenario? If you did not warn the man, So if you do not warn the person, and when you strike the person, why is he put to death? So it must be, it's obviously that what's the case? It's obviously that it's the case that you warned him. And if you warned him, the Ibis Shabbos, Malka Behema Yishalmena, and if you warned him, and on Shabbos, why, if you strike the animal, well, you have to pay. If you strike the animal on Shabbos, causing the wound on the animal, that's liability for death. So it must be that what's the scenario? El must be we have no choice but to say that this is a situation which is taking place during the week. So now Rav Papa says to Abaye, another question. Rav Papa Abaye, Rabba, who said earlier, according to Rabbi Meir, Rabba said that what is Rabbi Meir of the opinion that we don't apply kimwei b'deramine in a case of knas, in a case where it's a punitive damage because it's a chidushu. Torah has introduced us to a new idea. Since the Torah has introduced us to a new idea, we don't apply kimwei b'deramine, and therefore you always pay the knas. So he says, "Li Rabba the Amar chidushu shachit Torah b'knas va'afagav the mikdam mishalem." According to Rabba, who says this is a chiddush that the Torah introduced by knas, and therefore even though you've killed somebody, you still have to pay, even though he is afagav. And so according to Rabbah, who says that even though he dies, he also has to make the payment. This is according to according to Rabbah, who says so if that's the case, who is our Mishnah like? If you want to say our Mishnah is like Ika Rabbi Meir, if you want to say our Mishnah, which says is like Rabbah, that even though you put to death, you pay the knas, and we have a big problem because kasha bito, because tomorrow we're going to get to the Mishnah, which says that if you are ma'anes your daughter, that you have no penalty. And so that's the next Mishnah. And so if that's the case, it does not work with Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir would say that you do have a penalty. So look at Rashi for a second. So Rashi says, "The bishlam or reish lakish to ukmelahi digana v'tavach b'Shabbos b'tobeach ayidei acher." So it makes sense according to Reish Lakish, who establishes the case of somebody who stole and then slaughtered the animal on Shabbos. He said somebody else slaughtered it. Remember, that was the way that Reish Lakish explained how we would explain that the Mishnah, but if he had slaughtered it himself, he would not pay. Or Mishalim, because he would say, "Oh, kasha." Then it's not difficult. Why is it not difficult? Because it would say, because according to that approach, Rabbi Meir does not say that if you're put to death, you make a payment, even by a case of knas. But according to Rabbah, remember we said on the bottom of 30, Rabbah says on the bottom of 34a, Rabbah said, how do we explain? Because we have to go back a little bit. Remember we had said on the bottom of 33b, that Reish Lakish had said, we'll go back a little bit so we understand this. Reish Lakish had said that how do we explain the difference between the Mishnah in Kesubos and the Mishnah in Makos? That Makos says that you get lashes, and the Mishnah in Kesubos says you get a payment. That Reish Lakish had said, the Mishnah here is in Kesubos is Rabbi Meir, who says local Mishalim, that you get lashes and you make a payment. And so therefore, when it says in our Mishnah in Kesubos, you make a payment, it means in addition to lashes. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, we have a question according to Reish Lakish. If you want to say our Mishnah is like Rabbi Meir, then how come in the case of the daughter, you don't make a payment? In the case of where somebody assaults his daughter, there is no payment. Only in the case of somebody assaults his sister is a payment. So if you want to say, Rameir says, so the Gemara says in the bottom of 33, but you want to say Rameir says, local Masham Islay, Meisu Masham Islay. Rameir says when it comes to lashes, you make the payment, but not when it comes to a case where you're put to death. Where it says, well, if that's the case, we have a brisa. Brisa is where somebody, where there's a slaughter, where an animal is stolen and slaughtered on Shabbos. Then under those circumstances, you are obligated to pay. You're obligated to pay, according to Rebbe Meir. But there, isn't that a case of death? So we say, no, that's the case. Rebbe Meir says it was slaughtered by somebody else. That's why you pay. But if you did the slaughter yourself, indeed, you would be exempt. He says, Nesu Mishalim Leisle, that you don't make the payment if you did it yourself. But Rabbah gave a different answer to that question. Rabbah on the bottom of Ramadan Amud Aleph says, you slaughtered it by yourself, and still, why are you liable? Why are you liable if you slaughtered it by yourself? So the Gemara explains that the reason why. So according to Rebbe Meir, what's the reason why you have liability there? According to Rebbe Meir, hold on one second. What's the reason if that's the case? If you slaughtered it by yourself, what's the reason? Going to the Rabbi says, and Rabbi Meir says, Lokum Misham in general, he says that Lokum Misham you do have, and Mesa Misham you don't have. But this case is different. In the case of a Kanas, he would say, even though in case of a Kanas, he would say, even though you're put to death, you also pay. That's what Rabbi says, Rabbi Meir says. So now going back to the question, says so it says that whenever the Torah gives a kanas, a punitive damage, we say that even though you put to death, you also make the payment. Masnisin kaman mukila. So then who is our Mishnah like? Ika Meir Kashabita. Well, if that's the case, you should always have to make a payment by the daughter. Why does the next Mishnah say there's no monetary penalty by the daughter? And so therefore it can't be like Rebbe Meir. And Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, and if you want to say it's like Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, what did Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana says? He said that when it comes to a liability for lashes and payment, there we say a person is loco mishalim, but when you get lashes, you also make the payment. But when it comes to death, we say even by knas, there's no miso mishalim, and so therefore, it makes sense to say why in our Mishnah you make the payment even though there's lashes because he says, but when it comes to lashes and a payment, you make the payment, but not by death. But if that's the case, we have a question with a sister, Kashiach also, because in our Mishnah, it's clear that somebody is liable for kanas, where he says under those circumstances, you shouldn't be chayav a kanas because you're chayav kares. The ik Rabbi Yitzchak, and if it's like Rabbi Yitzchak who says that if you're chayav kares, you're not chayav for lashes, and so therefore one who has relations with their sister, one who assaults a sister is liable for kanas because there's no lashes to exempt you. And so if that's the case, kasha mamzeris. Well, then we have a question mamzeris where there is lashes. Why does he say you're liable for kanas even though you have liability for lashes? So hani chay savra Rabbi Yochanan. It makes sense if you follow the position of Rabbi Yochanan, who says that when you have liability for lashes, accidentally, you're not going to be exempt from money. It's only by death. So if Rabbah holds like Rabbi Yochanan, he could say that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yochanan, who says that we're talking about a case where he wasn't warned, and therefore you have the liability for kanas. But if he holds like Reish Lakish, who says that if it's chivi malchus shogugim, you're exempt from money, how would he answer it? He must hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's feeling, and so Ramaz then turns to Abaya. According to Reish Lakish, who says that the Torah says accidental lashes is like accidental death, and you're exempt from the payment if you did an action which if done intentionally would result in lashes, you're exempt. Tana de Pagale de Rabbi Chunya ben Akana. Who is a Tana who argues with Rabbi Chunya ben Akana and who says that you have to pay a monetary penalty by Chayvi Crucis? So Gemara says either Meir or Rabbi Yitzchak. It could be either one of those. Okay, we'll stop here, pick this up, God willing. We'll review this at 8 and pick it up again tomorrow.